Hello, and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. My name is Matt Loteplo, and on behalf of OTC Markets, we're very pleased you have joined us for our next presentation from Outcrop Silver and Gold Corp. Please note, you can submit questions in the box to the left of the slides. You can also view a company's availability for one-on-one meetings through the Schedule Meetings tab found on the conference platform. At this point, I'm very pleased to welcome Ian Harris, President and CEO of Outcrop Silver and Gold Corp, which trades on the OTCQX Best Market under the symbol OCGSF and on the TSXV under the symbol OCG. Welcome, Ian.
Thanks a bunch. It's a real pleasure to be here. So I'm very excited to be able to talk today about Outcrop Silver. But in generalities, why we're so excited about this project is it's truly one of a very few handful of projects that are high grade and primary silver projects in the world. And I look forward to sharing all that with you. But obviously, I'm sure have you seen with a lot of these presentations, lots of forward-looking statements. So definitely everyone should be doing their own due diligence. So my name is Ian Harris, as explained. I am the CEO of the company, but I've been in the company since July of this year. As a mining engineer in background, I have 25 years in the industry, and 15 of those have been living and working in South America. And so I really like to get involved in projects that have the potential to become future mines. And that's what's really was the excitement about Santa Ana. The previous CEO, Joe, who is still a director of the company, an excellent exploration geologist, is really who took this project to the stage it is today. But now it's taking a different spin. Just a touch more about my history, and a little explanation. I was early in my career. I was at the startup of the San Cristobal project in Bolivia. I was senior vice president, country manager for Corriente, and was responsible for taking the Mirador project and took it all the way to the start of construction. It went on to be the first industrial scale project in the history of Ecuador. So this is ground in areas that I like working, and I like being involved in projects that have the potential to become future mines, because that's, after all, really what the investment dollars are for. So if we look back at kind of where things were, Santa Ana, the major project of the company and the 99.9% of the focus of the company, that just put out a maiden resource of 37 million tons. About 37 million ounces of silver. But the big takeaways from that is, first, it's only the beginning. It was only based on 7 veins. 2, it was 73% silver, and that really is a unique starting point for a project. So 37 million is really only the start of the story. So then in July of this year, we started expansion drilling and restarted our drilling programs, slowly but surely. But then something really exciting was the lock cycle flotation we got back. And I'm going to dive deeper into the presentation, why this is so exciting, achieving 93% recovery on flotation alone. First, for many of you, is when we talk about a project that's 73% silver, and there's really only a handful of them in the world, why is that so important? And I think the big reason is, on silver, you're seeing both a supply issue and a demand issue. So we've definitely seen a deficit, but a huge upcoming demand that's very unpredictable, but it kind of covered all the spaces of all the energy transition and green energy. Silver for many years has been called also an industrial metal, but really it's going to be coming into its own on a high requirement in the future. But it's also undervalued. It normally ties very closely overall to the price of gold. But that ratio is really out of sync. And the other one is it's much more where gold went from $1,000 to $1,600 in that same time. Silver went from $15 to $45. So it's a multiplier effect that can really happen if silver really begins to take off. So for those that believe, which I obviously do believe, that silver is undervalued and it's going to hit a supply demand crunch that could really project the price, the Santa Ana project is probably the best, or one of the best projects in the world leveraged to silver, because it's 73% silver, where most projects are called silver and there might not be so silvery after all. So the next part is the exciting, and really this is a list on these 4 companies, actually 3 companies and 4 different projects, are the only projects that are in a development company that have indicated resource. And I think if I include inferred resources, I might only add 1 more. And I'll probably often there might be a couple out there that I don't know about, but it's not a big number. The list is very short. So if you look at these numbers, first, grade is king, right? Because it really reflects the amount of money that you get out of a project as it's pulled out of the ground. And then the second piece is how much of that is actually silver. So I like putting the comparison to Max Silver because this project is one of the highest grade silver projects in the world, right? And in Mexico. The Santa Ana project is in Colombia. So first, the labor rates are even more attractive than Mexico. But if you look at it on a silver basis, and you believe that even silver could go much higher and much dramatically higher compared to a same valuation in gold, it is the highest grade silver project that is on this list when you're looking just in terms of pure silver. Because you look at some of the others that have higher overall grade, but they're not really silver. So this is a very important starting point and really part of the exciting part of the story. I'll brush over this quickly, but there was a very, very high percentage of this project that was in the indicated resource. And it was important. It might have been early for many companies because you put out a resource estimate and they don't really understand that the project has lots of room to grow. They're like, oh, okay, that's kind of a pin has been pushed into the project. But it was important because it was such high grade to demonstrate that it really hangs together. It hangs together along strike and it hangs together at depth. And this is important to build confidence that this high grade actually is consistent over an extended area. The next piece is, this is our resource estimate. So if you look at the resource estimate, there was really 6 veins, but each one of those veins contributed an important part of the overall resource. So it wasn't like 90% was one ore shoot or something of the sort. It was each time we add a vein or an ore shoot, it is adding significant resources to our project. And they're all at significant grades, high grade silver content. And so that means if we've only done 7, we've already identified an additional 22 veins that have been mapped and sampled either through channel sampling or through trenching, right? So they're bona fide exploration targets, right? Each time we add one of them, we have a high level of confidence that we're going to be adding additional resources to this project. So if you look at this map, the red veins are the veins that were included in the resource estimate. The orange veins, or the orange are the map veins that we have, and the majority of many of them, a total of now 22, including the 7, have channel sampling or trench sampling that make them bona fide. And you can see that these grades continue to hold over this 15-kilometer trend. The takeaway is, I think emotionally, there's a 100 million ounce mark that's a very important threshold for market, but we clearly have a pathway to get to those kind of numbers, right? And so that's the work that we're doing now in terms of drilling, is looking and starting to add, and we're really, really focused on adding additional veins, not necessarily added resources, going deeper or a little bit on long strike. We're really looking right now. It's a slower process than with only one drill. It's really slow, but it is to make sure we are adding and be able to convert these from targets or bona fide drill targets to say, now we're moving these towards a resource estimation. Like, we've got enough information that now this additional vein is ready to be added to resource, to be able to show that pathway to market on how we can get over this 100 million mark, right? So that is the work that we're doing today, is not just, hey, we're going to add a little bit here, a little there. It's looking at these additional targets and hunting them down. It's a lot of work, but we are highly confident because we obviously have the sampling at surface and the mapping at surface. So that is the current process we're in when you can say the exploration strategy. The other part of the story, though, that's really exciting for me, and it's a little bit more difficult to understand when you're looking at various projects, is the mineralogy of this project is actually what makes it so unique. So it's not just because it's a spectacular high grade, but 88% of the silver is actually a silver sulfide. And that might not mean a lot to a lot of people, but when we put out a flotation number and we say we have 93% recovery of silver by flotation alone, okay, we're actually looking at redoing this to do gravity separation and then treat the gravity tails. So we even think that we could even make significant improvements. But the silver is actually floating. So if you look at other projects and you say, okay, they've got 90% recovery or whatever number recovery, many times the silver is recovering with other sulfides, pyrite or zinc or lead. The difference is when you sell for example, a zinc concentrate, you don't get paid for the silver at 100%, right? The normal payable is about 75% of the silver value. So when you put out a grade, you might as well and you put out a recovery, you might as well cut it out, because what many projects don't put into their numbers, they'll put a grade, they'll put a recovery, but they don't put the payable. And that's what's really important. Is at the end of the day is how much you get paid for. So as a minimum, this is a very, very high grade precious metal concentrate. So it's not a zinc concentrate, it's not a lead concentrate, it's not a sulfide concentrate, it's a precious metal concentrate. But it is also so high grade that it can be smelted directly. Whether you do it or not, that we're still working through that process, but you could definitely smelt this material and create doré directly from a flotation concentrate. So the obvious part is, well, you can produce silver without cyanide, right? So from a permitting and environmental perspective, this is huge, right? But the other perspective is, if you can take silver and get it into doré, then you're getting a 98% payable, 99% payable. So when you look now at Santa Ana and why we get so excited about it, you have very high grade, you have very high recovery, and you have a very high payable, right? So you're not losing that value within that chain, which really makes very exciting, is because it really becomes decoupled from scale. You don't have to have a certain scale or size to be economic. And so that's the next part of the strategy I want to talk about. So first of all, we're in a district. Within that district is pretty much the biggest metals district of Colombia. Many people don't know this, but Colombia, I think, is the 5th largest producer of coal, and it's the largest producer of coal in Latin America. But when you look at the existing operations, the biggest operations are sitting right here. And you look, there's Buriticá, Segovia, Marmato, which just got their new permit, which is exciting because we know those numbers will improve, right? And even to the south of us, there's the Provenir mine, which is about a 500 ton per day mine that's currently operating. So it's in a district that people are accustomed and knowledgeable and know mining. And actually, mining has been going on here since the colonial times. But something that's very interesting, if you look at the history, well, if you look at this history of Segovia, it's extremely old. But if you look at Buriticá or you look at Marmato, all of these projects started as small-scale projects. They started as small-scale projects and continue to expand until, like, based on a larger feasibility study, made that last large jump. And so that is something that we're now starting to do at Santa Ana, right? Looking at a very, very, very small project, a pilot scale project, which would go under a small mining permit within Colombia, which would be much faster and a much quicker turnaround, looking at a very small scale plant. We're still defining it, but say it's 50 tons per day, which is really small. It's, if I look at the size of my desk, a ball mill about the size of my desk installed. We've had turnkey budget level proposals for less than $1 million installed. You could get a plant of that size. But it is at these grades, at these recoveries, and these payables that would create an EBITDA of $3 to $4 million a year. Now, the purpose of something like that isn't to get rich on it, but it is to get into production, right? So it will completely de-risk the project by demonstrating that there's a clear pathway, and a pathway that then is you have a permit in hand, and then you're only working on an expansion of that existing permit. So that's really the two separate pathways that we see and have a vision of creating value for our shareholders and where we can go from here. One, we know that we have a pathway to get over 100 million ounces and that continued exploration in terms of resource expansion. And we're executing on that now and currently drilling. But the other way is completely de-risking this project and maybe even decoupling it a little bit in terms in the future in order to have a small revenue stream. Like you could imagine trying to permit a Buritica mine, which is 4,000 tons per day. That could take several years, but if you're already producing 1,000 tons per day already, then it's not as painful. You don't have to go through that whole entire very dilution type process that can happen during that permitting process. So we're really excited because we have the best of both worlds, and we can create value through that way. Now, the last thing is I'm currently in Medellin. I live in Colombia, and based on previous experiences, taking extremely large projects and getting them across the finish line is one of the other reasons I've been based here, been working in Colombia for 7 years and living here for the last 2 years, is I knew the Outcrop team from the beginning and knew that we shared a very similar vision in terms of the most important aspect of whether a project becomes a future mine really is the social landscape, and that the best way to develop and really get a strong project is creating real relationships. So it's not really necessarily about all the nice things you do. It's really about creating relationships and building those relationships over time and being a part of the communities in which you work. And that's one thing I'm very proud with the work that's already been done to date. High focus on employment and a high focus on developing local contractors, et cetera, that can support the project, because this is something that happens over a long period of time. And sometimes to get an exploration program done, things trying to move quickly, and you kind of bring things in from the outside, but for a decision from the beginning to become part of the community and work together with them. And that's based on an experience and a very strong management team and experience, starting with myself, but Guillermo, who is our VPX from Mexico, accustomed to working in these kind of narrow, high-grade veins. Also worked on the neighbor project right to the south, a little one called Fruta del Norte, but has a huge experience in understanding how, because these are very structurally controlled veins, understanding those, be able to see them in 3 dimensions. He's absolutely amazing. Kathy Lee, who came from Silver Corp, for example, Joe, who was previously the CEO of the company. Anna Milena was the executive vice president of Collective Mining, which is one of the big success stories here in Colombia. So a lot of knowledge and experience in managing capital markets, financing, but also that local experience and understanding how to work in South America. So I joined on July 20th, and this is a little map. I think we've done very well. In the beginning, I think there was a little bit of a draw against the project. People were hoping for a little larger resource estimate, but I think understanding and really being able to, it was September at Beaver Creek when we first got the story out. And then for the last month, we've been in Europe at Zurich and Frankfurt and London. Has really resonated, this overall story. And so we've really outperformed our peer group in terms of the ETF that's comprises all silver juniors. So I'm really excited about that. I feel that we were dramatically undervalued compared to our peers, which gave us some room to create value, just understanding this larger story, which is very exciting for us. So I believe in general, right, that we have a story, it's resonating, we're drilling, we have a know-how to create value, even if market doesn't completely improve over time. We still can create significant value. But if silver starts increasing dramatically in price, we're one of the most highly leveraged projects to that in the world. So it's kind of I think we can create value in the short term, and we can create value over the long term, and obviously are highly leveraged to overall silver. So that's the overall story of Outcrop. And I think I left a little bit of time to perhaps answer questions. Okay. One of the first is, what are Outcrop Silver's next? What are your near-term plans? Okay, I think I went over those, some of the big ones that are coming up. I think it sounds strange, but even being able to tell the story and people hearing the story, and even what's happening in this backdrop, silver price. But the other one is, we are drilling, but people need to see that when the news they're looking for is that we're adding additional veins when we put them and really turn them into a true discovery, that they know that that's going to be adding significant ounces. And then obviously there's this pathway we're also working on, which is this small level pilot production. And so that's really some of the key catalysts. We need to get that. We're currently preparing that small minor permit. That's a big piece of news, and we're excited about getting into that process. So we do have some significant catalysts coming up in the future. So looking at some of these additional questions, how is the drilling program progressing? What is your meter target for 2024? So I need to be frank that perhaps one of the disappointments since starting in July has been the speed at which drilling has gone since the start of July. Through the end of the year, we are really already only at 3,000 total meters, which is a big disappointment. So we have made the decision and taken the decision to change out our contractor and actually go back to a previous contractor that had much better performance, because we'd like to really be getting over drilling. So we're going to take advantage of the December time period and start of the year to switch out the contractor and bring in a new drill contractor that we know has historically performed much better. So the goal here isn't a specific amount of meters. You've seen the amount of targets we have, the amount of work that we have to do, and really want to start really building. The goal again is to build out, to show that there's a pipeline of future resource. We expect to put out probably on an annual basis starting next year an update, but we don't want to go from 37 to 40. We want to take very large jumps to demonstrate that we're clearly have a pathway to get over that 100 million mark. And that would mean, rule of thumb, if we get 1,000 meters, we're looking at 2,400, call it 25,000 meters for 2024, with the little bit of bad news that the drilling has gone a lot slower than we had really hoped, because these are complex, structurally controlled. It takes time to understand how the veins are acting underground to track in and hunt down these resources and these ore shoots. So it was we're making that change at the beginning of the year. The next question, how is Outcrop Silver's cash position currently? So we had budget and we had money and we raised it, and we've been fiscally very responsible, which is nice, and really tightened things up to make sure that we had runway through the end of the year. We continue to have runway to the end of the year. We do have an at the market in place that gives us a little bit of flexibility because we wanted to push things out into the next quarter. Originally, we had planned to do a raise in this quarter. But now feeling that there's a good backdrop and some optimism coming in, we're trying to push that out. And I think we have enough gasoline in the fuel tank to get us into mid to late second quarter, our first quarter, to do an additional financing. But we would like to do that. We've seen a significant appreciation in our volume and our share price, which is exciting. And I think the backdrop in silver price is getting exciting again. So that's one of the reasons why I really like an at the market facility, because it gives you a little bit of leverage when you do the larger financing. How is the political situation in Colombia, and how is it affecting Outcrop Silver operations and future plans? So that's a really good question. And I just got back from Europe on I think it was Friday morning. So I got off a plane at 3:00 and went immediately to a conference, which I was invited to be on a part of the panel as one of actually the only representative from industry. Based on my experience, I'm fluent in Spanish, obviously. But the big news was that really it was put on by the Embassy of Chile, but together. And so there's the Vice Minister was presenting, the President of the National Mining Agency was presenting, and I was on panel with them. It's because many people, I always say we're also leveraged to Colombia, because the perception of Colombia is not understood. And I think the world will start understanding the importance that mining plays into the future of Colombia. And it's understood by this government that 60% of the exports are currently coal and oil. And whether the world doesn't want them or by political decision, which there is a policy to decarbonize the economy of Colombia, but there's specific plans that are specifically put onto strategic metals, and silver is obviously a very important strategic metal for the country, that this is a part of the plan. It's a part of being able to develop and advance these projects And so it is really ingrained into what is Colombia. We've seen local elections too. We've also seen a significant shift to the right. We see a big push, and the biggest topics, having my ear to the ground here in Colombia, are about employment and security, right, which is also associated with economic performance. So it's very much, especially in our area in Tolima, a very strong and support for projects that are run well and run professionally, and socially responsible and environmentally responsible. So I think the backdrop of Colombia is misunderstood. And I think that I see a very promising future. And I guess we'll go back to my experience. I say I was in the elections of Hugo Chavez, of Evo Morales, and also in Korea and Ecuador. And I've seen this play out before. So I'm also seeing the steps in Colombia, where you see that major step where there seems to be an overall significant public support to get these projects moving forward. So I think the news will only get better out of Colombia, and will also dramatically assist in the valuation of Outcrop. I think that's it in time, but always available. And the best person to write is always to Kathy. Kathy is great and gets me any questions she has and gets right back to me. So if there's any questions we didn't have, or there's additional questions, I think it'll be sent to us, and we'll